and welcome to Wrestling Chat with Friends. It is Thursday, so you know what that means. It's the AEW show, but I'm joined by just our normal cast of characters, as always, EJ the Collector and TG Sub Elite
Way
is
below.
ready to go. EJ, how you feeling, my buddy?
I am here. I am present. I am accounted for, and I'm accountable. I am doing great. Good to see both of you guys. Excited to talk AEW this week. Collector's Choice this week. We'll get right to it. I've said many times in this show, my introduction to professional wrestling was not through Hulk Hogan and the Rock and Wrestling Connection. It was NWA, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling, TBS on Saturday nights, 7:05 before the Braves. Tony Schiavone, David Crockett, guys like Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, the Four Horsemen. That's what I grew up on. Two very seminal events in my early wrestling childhood that drew me to the sport were two tournaments. One that the NWA held annually, and one they only did twice. I was, of course, talking about Starrcade, which was NWA's WrestleMania at the time. And then, like in 1987, I think it did in '88, they had the Jim Crockett Sr. Memorial Tag Team Cup, where they got a bunch of tag teams, put them in a tournament. It was held in Baltimore one year, $1 million check and a big trophy boot. My brother, in his thrift store, flea market travels, picked up what really could be like the Rosetta Stones of my professional wrestling collecting. VHS copies. Kids, if you don't know what VHS are, go ask your grandparents. They'll tell you. Of the Jim Crockett Senior Memorial Cup from 1987, the inaugural one, won by the Road Warriors, and Starrcade 86, the Skywalkers. The Skywalkers was the co-main event to this. The Road Warriors versus the Midnight Express battling on top of a 25-foot scaffold.
That's the scaffold match, yeah.
This match, of course, famous for Jim Cornette taking a fall off the scaffold. Yep. The other main event in that...
Is that the one where Cornette, hung, though? He didn't really fall. He took a bump, but he hung on the bottom of the scaffold.
Yes, he didn't go kind of over the top of the scaffold. He wasn't thrown off.
I remember that.
Crawled underneath. He probably fell 12 to 13 feet, but... he blew both his knees out because he fell.
Did he really?
Oh, he blew his knees out. Big Bubba Rogers, who was Ray Traylor, the big boss man. Yeah. He was supposed to catch Cornette, as Cornette has said in many interviews, but he was out of position, and Corny blew his knees out. But anyway, these VHSs, we had found these in Blockbuster back in the 80s, that was our weekend, my brother and I. So thanks to Andy for sending those. And I have a box from Pro Wrestling Crate coming tomorrow. So next week I'll have more new goodies to show you. But that's what we got, some vintage items to week. Let's get it on.
It's amazing how times have changed, because I think we mentioned this in previous episodes. We would have gone to a video store, seen an old wrestling pay-per-view, would have gotten it, would have been so excited to see it and not think anything of it. In today's age, that is not just the video store, but the idea of seeing something weeks or, even months behind is just, it's foreign. It's like no one does that.
If you didn't order it and buy it that night on pay-per-view or closed circuit TV, you might see it 4 months later when it shows up at your
and
store.
We were excited to get it. We knew when it was going to drop.
Mm-hmm.
TG, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. My collector's choice this week is gold. Gold is trading at near historic highs. It is one of the densest yet most malleable metals, as well as being highly ductile. So I recommend everyone, if you can get yourself some gold, get gold.
Do you have any gold? I don't see any gold on you.
Well, I don't like to advertise my possession of precious metals, but if you insist, I can produce some if need be.
Like some gold chains.
Funny story about, speaking of VHS tapes, I used to be a big fan of collecting, especially NFL games and tape trading or whatever. And then, of course, by the time we got to YouTube, it's completely obsolete now. So I have just on my bookshelf there a giant DVD album just filled with old NFL games, but I haven't added anything to that album in years, because at this point it's just just search for it on YouTube. It's there.
Yeah,
it's
there's no reason to do it. I was the same. I was the same with boxing matches. Like
Oh yeah.
in the 80s and 90s, like HBO boxing and all that,
Mhm.
we would record all of the big boxing matches on VHS tapes. I still got them in a box in my closet.
We just
But
recently got rid of ours too. We had all those Tyson fights that
yeah,
were being
like
shown.
we
Had
got
those on VHS.
tons of just Bernard Hopkins and Roy Jones Jr. That was more my era when I was recording them. Zab Judah, and we would just like store them, and we would often go back and watch them when it was appropriate. But now you just go to YouTube and watch the whole fight, or for wrestling, you go to YouTube and you can watch, any match, and you can go to Peacock and you can watch everything that you know WCW and WWE's ever done, and AEW, not AEW. What was AAW? What was the other one? Was there an
AWA?
AWA? Yeah, you can watch a lot of.
Mhm.
Cheatham, question for you. Did you watch Tyson Holyfield 2 at my house?
I do
I know
not
it-
believe so.
I know I had people over. It was we were in college, so I was home.
Yeah, no,
And
I don't think so.
I know I had people over for that. The reason I bring that up is this is like what was 98-ish, give or
So,
take.
I would have been in the service, so probably not.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So 98 or so. So my I was obviously home for whatever reason during college. So I'm at my parents' house. Had several people over to watch the fight, and that of course is famously the fight that ends when Tyson for the second time bites Holyfield's ear. And I just remember the next day. Of course, the fight ended so late that it wasn't in the paper or anything. The next day, coming down for breakfast and saying to my dad, "What do you think the outcome of the fight was last night?" And I will give you 100 guesses. It was like, what happened? I was like, well, let's go watch this, to bring it full circle, VHS tape of the fight.
There's and this one is weird. And we'll get to the show, I promise. But 2002 was Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson, and I was in college at this time, and I was doing like an abroad. It was like a all summer kind of abroad situation, and so where I was, I knew I wasn't going to see a pay-per-view. So I made my brother immediately overnight the fight, record it on VHS, overnight the fight, and then watched it the next day. But it was like, I just remember this, like, it was a big hoop to do about getting this VHS tape, and the people that were interested in it watched it with us. It was oh well, but those were the days.
Very last story.
It was time to be alive.
Very last story, and this will be a nice segue into wrestling talk.
Yes.
So the summer after I graduated from law school, of course, I was taking the bar exam, like most people who graduated from law school that same year. And I made a deal with my buddy Culpepper, who Cheatham, you know him, obviously. Yep. He's also a wrestling fan. And we were like, we start studying for the bar exam. We got to get in the zone. We can't be watching Raw and SmackDown every week or pay-per-views. So I would come downstairs and like manually, because this is no DVR at this point. They existed, but I didn't have one. And I would like manually like record each show like every week. And when the tape would fill up, I'd pop a new one in. I didn't watch any wrestling for like that whole summer that we were studying. So right after the bar exam that we'd planned, like Culpepper's coming over, we're going to watch like fast forward through, but watch like all of the wrestling we had missed. And then I think there was like a SummerSlam maybe was coming up or something. Anyway, there was a pay-per-view coming up. So we were going to get caught up and then watch the pay-per-view, and that was like our celebration for doing the bar. So we get to like the second to last episode that we had taped after powering through like this stack of tapes. And whoever was the authority figure at the time comes out and says, and next week, forget everything that we've been doing. We're going to have the WWE draft. And we were like, are you kidding me? Like everything got rebooted. And we were just like, God, what a colossal waste of time.
Hours.
How dumb are we?
It was awesome. That's still a fun experience. I'm surprised you guys made it through. Those are championship marathon runs. Gentlemen, we have a lot to talk about. We have some folks in the audience listening and following along. Thank you for doing so. If you want to leave a comment on either YouTube or Facebook, and it will come directly to us, and we'll try to answer any of the questions you may have. Really excited about that. but we are talking. Let's start it off by just talking about AEW. We haven't had a Thursday show in a long time. We haven't talked about AEW in detail for quite some time. AEW, as always, is doing some things that I think are really good, really creative, really exciting. And as always, AEW is doing some things where I comment in the chat group every week that I think they're missing the boat, misusing talent, and not developing enough storylines. Let's talk about the big one first, and then we'll move it along, especially last night, because I think they're building up and capitalizing this Pillars move, which is Jungle Boy, Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara, and MJF. Here's the thing about MJF had to do something kind of in between big things, and he had to have like a feud or a rivalry or something to really mark off his run and winning the title. And if you're going to have a long run, you've got to have people in there that aren't like colossal challenges. So from a standpoint of creativity, having MJF feud with this like 4-man Jungle Boy, Sammy Guevara, Darby Allin, for the time that we are in right now, I'm okay with it. I really think that it's appropriate. I think MJF has to come out of this, obviously. It gives him an opportunity to do something. But I do want to get everyone's thoughts on how they're kind of forming this, how they're shaping it up. It's really, really interesting up until kind of what happened at the end of Dynamite last night. I was thinking they were positioning Sammy more as a face-ish type of character because of the All Access stuff. Very clear that Darby is the face of this group. MJF is the heel. We kind of don't know where Jungle Boy Jack Perry stands, but I'm going to start with you, EJ. The big main event storyline of the next pay-per-view is going to be MJF versus one of the Pillars. What are you making of this story and how it came together?
Like you, I am not only okay with it, I'm good with it. I'm enjoying it. AEW is lucky. This idea of these 4 pillars, MJF, Sammy, Darby, Jungle Boy, these pillars were created. That t-shirt was put out a long time ago. Like within the first year of AEW being around, these 4 guys were sort of identified. The notion of the pillars has been sort of individually attributed to them. But I think about that t-shirt that's been out for a couple of years now on the website of this, the 4 of them, 4 pillars. They're lucky that all 4 of them are still there. They haven't gone anywhere else or had any significant, been poached anywhere yet. They all have stayed relatively in high profile storylines. And I think this is the right time to do it because as you look at the landscape of AEW right now, the biggest names outside of MJF are all sort of squaring off with each other right now. And I'm sure we'll get to a lot of those feuds. So an MJF feud with not one of the pillars, but one of the sort of, there are pillars, these 4 young guys who are getting older, but then there are sort of the ones that are keeping this ship floating and moving, like your Moxleys, like your Hangmans, like your Elites. So, until MJF has something to do with Adam Cole or Kenny Omega or perhaps one of the Japanese stars, I think feuds like this are excellent. I still think way down the road, Wardlow and him are going to revisit each other. We never know what's going to happen with Punk. But given Jungle Boy, Darby, and Sammy this opportunity to showcase their talents against who is arguably the best heel in 25 years, I am all for it. And so far, it's gone off really well.
TG, what do you make of it?
I think conceptually, it's a good idea to give this kind of spotlight to homegrown talent, and especially guys who are younger, are probably going to be AEW guys for a while. I think that this makes sense to build them up. I think the problem with it is, first of all, I think that the appeal that these guys have from my perspective is more what they do in the ring physically than their promo skills. And they were given a lengthy segment that felt longer than it was.
Yep.
And I was like, this is not like, you're showcasing these guys' weaknesses for an extended period of time, made worse by the fact MJF then comes out and it's like, oh my, like this is like the levels here are not close. So like, if you're trying to portray these guys as being on MJF's level and sort of these four sort of roughly equal pillars or theoretically equal pillars, you can do that in the ring with storytelling and match wise, but like to have those three guys come out, cut long promos, and then MJF come out and in 2 minutes just completely blow past those guys. I don't think the idea behind this is good, but I don't think the execution of it from what we saw Wednesday serves that goal.
Did you guys like the idea? Because I thought it was actually pretty creative to have this like mini tournament where someone, they all kind of square off against each other, and the person that comes out of this takes on MJF for the title. MJF pulls the name out of the hat for the bye, and the bye happens to be Darby Allin, lo and behold, the biggest face in this group. So that makes sense that he's not in the first round fight. But then it squares up Sammy Guevara, Jungle Boy. Winner takes on Darby Allin. Winner ultimately takes on MJF at the pay-per-view. And then shenanigans ensues. Do you like this whole MJF trying to kind of coax Sammy into guaranteeing him a spot in the finals, which we're all wrestling fans. We all know storylines. We ultimately realize that probably is not going to happen. So now I almost thought it was a tell on what, we kind of knew what I think we were going to see, much to my chagrin, because as EJ and TG, you both know, I'm not the biggest Darby Allin fan, but I thought the way that they played it out last night almost kind of guarantees what the future of this is going to be and what the pay-per-view main event's going to be.
It may. I could have probably done without it. Like I would have liked it better if there was going to be some 3-person round robin to decide, but MJ really wasn't the one orchestrating it. That would have given it a little more credibility. MJ pulling out hats and stuff, and then trying to grease whoever, somebody that he felt. I didn't need that, but it's okay. I'm still not totally convinced it won't be a 4-way dance or maybe even a triple threat if someone gets knocked out. I'm not really the least bit convinced it's going to be a one-on-one MJF versus, say, Darby at the pay-per-view, because then this whole thing doesn't really do too much for Sammy and Jungle Boy other than give him a little FaceTime. So, at the end of the day, these 4 pillars have been doing these promos together. I think we'll see all 4 of them in some way in the ring, maybe over two matches in the night, but I don't think MJF's going to do double duty. But yeah, I expect all 4 of them to be in a match at some point, either at All In, or sometimes they just throw these main events on a Dynamite, maybe, afterwards. But yeah, I didn't need MJF pulling those strings, but the idea of a tournament's okay. But yeah, we're going to see all 4 of them at the same time.
Tom, who do you think this benefits the most? Obviously, MJF's the champion. He's probably going to come out of this, but the idea, I think, is to elevate Sammy, Darby, and Jungle Boy and put him on an MJF level. One, do you think, clearly you're saying the promos don't do it, but do you think people are buying into this, and who is this helping the most?
I think it's ultimately going to help Sammy the most, just because he is the most involved from a story perspective. And so this sort of the self-promo, the monologues that we saw at the beginning, like I said, I don't think did much. But the part where there's this sort of weird relationship now between MJF and Sammy that, as you just pointed out, like we all know as wrestling fans, it'll just go perfectly and there won't be a problem.
Right.
However that plays out, I think whoever the person was who was involved in that story way, I think will benefit the most, because I think we all know whatever the setup is for that main event, whether it's a one-on-one match or reverts back to a 3-way dance or a 4-way or whatever, it is incredibly unlikely and bordering on almost impossible that MJF is going to lose his title in that match. And so the outcome is sort of a foregone conclusion. So the way that you build someone up is through story, obviously they're giving, even if he's not, winds up not being the guy in the main event of that match, I think Sammy is the one who's getting the most story benefit from it. And so therefore he's the one who's going to show us a new wrinkle to his character, more screen time, more interaction with the champion verbally. So I think he stands to benefit the most of those three guys.
EJ, is Sammy Guevara the star outside of MJF? Is Sammy Guevara the star of this show here?
Yeah, I think so.
This group.
I think so, and I think he also has the most potential out of these three. Like we've seen this. You know, can you imagine Darby Allin doing any other sort of character change? No. I can see Sammy being a, heartthrob face, roughly. I can see him. We've seen him be this heel. I personally think Jack Perry is limited, and I think this will possibly expose that further. Jack can't do anything that Darby and Sammy can't do, and at the moment, they're both better talkers than Jack Perry is, albeit nowhere near MJF's level. So, yeah, I don't think this is going to help Jack Perry at all. Darby, it has his cult status sort of cemented. So, yes, Sammy, with what he can do, with his range of emotions that he has shown, both on his all access is making him the star of this show outside of MJF for sure.
And that's where I would go with it. That's why I agree 100% is that All Access, if anybody's following All Access, Sammy Guevara is basically the star of that show. Brett Baker and Sammy Guevara are like the A and 1A of All Access.
So far.
And so the way that All Access is set, and the weird part about this is, and I don't know, EJ, if I agree with you in regards to Sammy being over as a massive babyface, because All Access is about as close to giving him babyface Sammy as you can give, and he still is very punchable. Like, there's nothing that he's doing that I don't think, like, wins the crowd over. Even if you put him opposite MJF, it was really weird. Remember back when they first started feuding Hangman and Bryan Danielson? Bryan Danielson was the biggest face in the company at the time, and literally within one promo, like overnight, he became the biggest heel in the company, right? Like, I don't know what you can do to a Sammy Guevara at this point that kind of even makes him get, because the people just love to boo that kid, like they do, and they're trying to make Ty Guevara. They're kind of trying to give us a sympathy vote for her. They're still booing the crap out of her. They don't like, you know what I mean? So I do think, in the end of the day, Sammy has got all of the tools to be a huge, huge star. And I think All Access is helping him quite a bit. I think Sammy's biggest challenge is that he's in the same wrestling company with MJF. And MJF is going to be the biggest heel as long as he's there. You know what I mean? So they've got to figure that out. I agree with you 100% that Jungle Boy Jack Perry is I think AEW is kind of forcing him upon us. And he's and as talented as he is, he's just another talented guy, if that makes sense. He doesn't have the star quality that I need to be at the top of the ticket. I actually feel that way about Darby too, and I know we're wrong, because Darby Allin to me is one of the most frustrating wrestlers of, like, I just don't get it. And everybody else seems to get it. And I was assuming, EJ, that your, hot take that was going to drive me crazy was going to be like Darby Allin's the greatest wrestler in the company or something.
Oh, it's so much hotter. And you're going to hate it. You're going to hate it.
I'm starting to sweat just from the heat already.
Well, all right, because any final words on this? I think we've covered the top of the roster and the four pillar situation. Any last words before we switch gears to another champion in the same vein? But
this is going to continue to help MJF. Obviously, it's definitely going to help Sammy. I bet it's going to be sort of a net wash for Darby, and it's going to be it's not going to move the needle much for Jack Perry.
What about AEW? Does this feud help AEW?
Sure. It showcases four young homegrown talents, and that's never a bad thing.
Yeah.
Are you sure? Because if they prove they don't have it, I'm thinking it also could hurt them.
Well, I mean, hurt
If
them.
this doesn't move the needle, and you're giving all these guys all this time,
I don't know how much this is going to move the needle. I mean, they're sitting about 830 to 870,000
right?
a week, but that's a whole separate take. That's not my concern. I'm not a TV executive, so
Right.
I don't care so much about that.
Since when? You're not a TV executive?
2 weeks notice just ended yesterday.
Congrats on your return.
Thank
TG,
you.
honestly, really quickly, do you think this storyline helps advance AEW at all? Wins new fans, brings anybody in?
Brings new fans, I think that's a different question. I agree with Elliot that at a certain point, if you're going to have homegrown guys who are, near the top of the card or in the title pictures and stuff like that, you got to do something. I mean, you can't either take them off TV and let them go, or you give them the time. And I think the fact that these guys are young, if these dudes were, 39 to 41 years old, I would be like, this is crazy. It's like cut bait and start over. But these guys all have, wherever their relative levels are, they all have time and room to grow as they get more reps and experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to forget sometimes just how young like MJF is because he's so good already. But with these other guys, I'm not saying that they're going to reach his level, but I do think they will get better. I think that so your question though about new fans is a good one and an important one. This is definitely a long-term strategy, meaning it's not going to pay dividends in terms of new fans like in the next couple of months. But you want down the road to have these guys, especially like if MJF were to leave sometime next year, guys who are like have been at that level, have been in main events, et cetera, and these guys are building up those sort of metaphorical resumes now.
Yeah, you've got to create the next Edges, Randy Orton, Seth Rollins, guys that may not carry the title or the company or be the overall A guy, but really good workers all the time.
Yeah.
Speaking of homegrown talent versus outsiders, see what I did there? Let's talk about the outsiders and the way that they built up this women's kind of battle here in AEW. That seems now is very clear now is a story in the women's division of AEW. That no more, you rarely see Jade Cargill. Like you don't know what's happening with Jade anymore. You don't know what's happening with Athena or anybody else. Chris Statlander's not back. This is it. This is really what you get. And it is Ruby Soho, Toni Storm, Saraya, and it is the champion, who I think is getting buried in this story, but we'll talk about that, and the homegrown hero and star of All Access, Brett Baker, DMD. Do we like where this is going? It's a very much an NWO, Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Outsiders type vibe, even down to the spray paint. Do we like the recreation of this taking on homegrown stars in AEW? They are by far right now the biggest names in the AEW women's division.
Yep. Well, my hot take is so scorching.
This is it?
It's also adjacent to this take.
Okay.
So TG, I'm gonna let you take it, and then I'm gonna drop a nuclear bomb on this thing.
God, I'm ready. I got to get down into my shelter. I like the concept. Again, the concept is, I think, good. I'm totally fine with aligning these former WWE people who sort of were like let go by the company and whatever. Like I'm totally fine with that. But the execution of the booking of this storyline and this feud, in my opinion, has been very bad. So last night, and I said this in the group chat, if last night had been sort of an isolated outlier that we booked it this way because we're in Pittsburgh, Britt's Pittsburgh, she's going to be super over.
Hometown hero.
I'd be okay with that if it's a one-show thing. But Cheatham, this is something you identified a while ago. Like they have consistently booked Britt to look stronger than their own champion, who, again, was somebody who became champion because she organically got over and the crowd demanded it. When you have that kind of thing happening, you fan those flames. You don't try to snuff them out and say like, no, look over here, Britt Baker. Remember her? She's really good. So I think it's been poorly handled, number one. Number two, specifically in this sort of what's happened in the last this week. Again, I'm fine with Britt being the hero, hometown hero, whatever, going over in her hometown. But like the way that it unfolded, it was like Hayter gets injured, and then Britt basically is taking on the Outcasts 1-on-3 and wins.
Yep.
Where did they go from here? Because it reminded me a little bit of when WWE made the really dumb decision to have CM Punk win. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but he won a handicap match against the Shield 1-on-3. Correct? He beat all three of them in a handicap match.
I mean, I can recall,
which to me was insane, and it's probably a good thing that you all have forgotten about this because it was such a dumb. I was like, you guys are building these guys as the next big thing in the company. Why? I get that Punk is a big deal too, and even Punk has talked about it and said it was really stupid. I didn't agree with it, but that's what they told me to do. So to wrap this up, I think that one thing that we've touched on a couple of times, both here and in the past recently, is the fact that it's really interesting how All Access, the presentation on All Access seems to be playing into the way that they were booking the kayfabe show, even though we know that they're just two different kinds of kayfabe. And I just think they're making a mistake with that. So I'll leave it there.
These guys are smart TV guys. You wouldn't think that mistakes like that are done intentionally. My concern about all this is that, in Cheats, do you remember in the All Access, maybe it was even week 1, when Britt was talking about that, she's currently not in the title picture. So the fact that she's not, it's her job to she sort of said, I'm trying to elevate the other women, or she phrased it something like that to suggest.
She phrased it that way to take shots at Thunder Rosa, but go ahead.
And I don't have to be, I've been in this main event picture for so long, so it's okay for me to take a step back to do these other responsibilities. Tony Schiavone is producing a lot of All Access, and he holds a candle for Britt, has since day one. It wouldn't shock me if Britt Baker has gotten into production meetings with All Access. It wouldn't shock me at all if this was sort of like Tony Khan kind of made this a joint project with Tony Schiavone, and Tony was like, who can I get? Who are my closest friends? Britt Baker seems like, and I might be wrong, it feels like Britt can't help but want some of the spotlight for herself. This feels a little bit ego-driven, the same way she's took these shots at Thunder Rosa, which seemed just like to be a real unforced error on AEW's part. I get a lot of feelings of Britt's ultimately sort of looking out for herself and doesn't want to lose the spotlight, and that's never a good thing when you're sort of part of a larger team. So it gives me concerns about Britt, although I still respect her hard work. But if someone's gonna throw a wrench into the women's division, it could be Britt doing that, because I think she craves it a little too much.
Is this the nuclear take?
Mm-mm.
Okay,
completely different. Let's just get to my take, because it has to do with a lot of this.
All right, so this is the nuclear. All right, hold on a second. Okay, I'm ready. Go.
All right, let's get ready. Yeah, I'm ready.
You said it yourself, Cheats.
Yes.
This is the number one story in the women's division. And you mentioned a few things. Jade Cargill I saw one graphic for her last night.
Yeah.
It was to advertise that this Friday we'll hear from her.
Right.
I think last Wednesday on Dynamite, there was a graphic that said on Friday, we'll hear from Jade Cargill. So we're hearing some stuff from her. We're not seeing her wrestle too much. I think she's like at 57-0. Is that even being generous? She's maybe 55-0. She's had less than 7 matches in the last 7 months, I bet. She's rarely showing up for work and wrestling. She is the TNT champion. I gotta be really careful on how I phrase this, because
she's 56-0 for the record.
So she said,
I'm looking at the records.
That 50-0 seemed forever ago.
Yeah. Yep.
Forever ago. And she's 56-0. And we're seeing a lot of promos that are 30 seconds to 1 minute long. They start the same and they end the same, with her being off. Here's the take. Oh, I gotta be careful. Right now, Jade Cargill, who is a talented human being and seemingly athlete, she is basically Eve Marie of WWE. And here are the similarities and then a couple key differences. Did either of y'all?
I can't wait for this list. Go.
Did either of y'all get the sense?
Similarities, they're hot.
They're both beautiful, beautiful.
That's where it stops.
Does Eve Marie? Did she ever seem like she really loved wrestling?
No, she was a total diva, right? Entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jade Cargill does promos. We've talked about her her talent in the ring, while better than Eve Marie's, no doubt about it, has not dramatically improved. I wouldn't put her, when talking about professional wrestling, as a generational talent. I'm now officially concerned why she's not being featured every week. That could be creative. I am definitely now questioning Jade's love for this sport. Jade clearly has intentions of larger things than the second biggest professional wrestling company on the planet. She, I'm sure, wants to be fashion, music, movies. She probably has her sights set on Hollywood. To my knowledge, she has not done any of that yet. She's appeared on lots of shows. She showed up at clubs and at parties. She had a lot of photos taken of her, always holding her. I would say she's probably not spending a lot of time in the ring with Jerry Lynn learning 6 new moves a week, because we never see her use those moves and we never see her wrestle. Eve Marie, I'd almost argue, has had more success than Jade Cargill. Eve Marie has been in movies. She has been.
Has she?
She's done. I mean, they're terrible direct-to-TV movies, but she has actually been like in a feature film or two. Probably.
I did not know that.
She likely has her own clothing or skincare line or workout line or something. I don't think Jade has any of those. I don't believe Jade really loves this and is just using this to get famous, which is okay because she's hugely talented. I almost want her to be in those genres, but she's doing no good in wrestling right now. A, because she's not appearing on TV regularly enough, and she's not improving. Both complaints about Eve Marie.
First of all, really quickly, because I understand and I'm kind of receiving your take and your observation of this. Jade Cargill is an employee. She has probably an employee that they picked up seemingly out of nowhere, trained to wrestle, and has gotten this far. I don't think, unlike, we just talked about Brett Baker, Tony Schiavone, Tony Khan in production meetings, I don't think Jade Cargill has any say in the direction of her career, when she appears, when she doesn't, when she goes. There is nothing that I have seen that would make it seem as if this is not her doing all that she can to basically take this kind of golden opportunity that was presented to her and work with it as best she can. We heard stories weeks ago, months ago, maybe even years ago now, of her training, taking extra training sessions with Bryan Danielson. Bryan Danielson was supposed to be the person that had taken her under the wing to train. You talked about Jerry Lynn. You talked about, other places where she has gone early on Red Velvet to work on her, not Red Velvet, Brandy Rose, to work on her promo skills. These are all things that we heard of her doing in the past. Now, not only I don't think she has any choice of what happens in her directional career, the other side of this is you don't know, because she's so green. AEW seems to have an issue with people wanting to work with other people. It's very well documented that Thunder Rosa didn't want to work with a lot of folks. Brett Baker didn't want to work with a lot of folks. So it's like, we don't, we don't know if like Athena, Tony Storm, or even now Ty Valkyrie is like, hey, I don't know if I want to be in the ring, because clearly we see a lot of the women's division of AEW and what's it called, like botches of the week on Twitter.
Botchamania.
But yeah, like, so I understand what you're saying. I just don't know everything that comes along with Jade Cargill. I don't know how much of it she controls, and I don't know how much of it she has the ability to go into Tony Khan's office or an executive VP's office and say, hey, like, you know, let me do this or let me do more. You know what I mean? Or they all know that she's green and say, hey, look, train. And we're going to start to, you know, put you in different spots, but train until we can get you, you know, to a level where we feel like we have Ruby Soho and Tony Storm and Brett Baker and Jamie Hayter all have been wrestling for years on years. So I just don't know. I appreciate the take. I do not think she is Eva Marie at all.
You said you've seen All Access enough to know that. How do you get yourself on TV more? Just like, I mean, Tay was talking about it. Tay Guevara was talking about it. You got to track down Tony. You got to back Tony in the corner. You got to keep every day. You got to have a different story. If you're sitting there waiting for stories to be brought to you, it's never going to happen. Now, Jay may have had the luxury of having just an unbelievable presence, an unbelievable look, that it's someone that they gravitated towards. If these women are not wanting to work with her yet because she's so green,
I mean, I don't know.
I don't. None of us know. You're right.
Here's
I don't know
the thing,
either.
though. I don't think Tony Schiavone came up with that stupid Bow Wow line. So, you know, remember the whole Bow Wow thing?
If she's not going to Tony,
that would come out of the mind of Jade Cargill.
If she's not going to Tony Khan every week and saying, you know, I want to get in the ring, I want to do this, then it kind of goes back to me questioning, like, how much does she really love this business, or is just doing this for exposure so she can do what she wants to do?
You know, it's interesting though, because I felt
that out of Eve Marie, and
but
I'm starting to get the same spidey senses out of Jade.
No, I don't think that's fair at all. And I like I said, I understand and appreciate the take, but I just don't think it's fair in the sense that what have we heard out of Cargill's camp? I'll tell you what we've heard. Absolutely nothing. All we've heard is this woman being as professional as you can be. And basically what happens when we talk about other folks like Thunder Rosa or Brett Baker or some of the folks, unfortunately, even to Ty Mello, like the squeaky wheel and the dirt sheets and the blogs, which, just to be honest, we don't even know Jade even knows that game.
Totally.
Right. So, you know, if it came out on a news story tomorrow and says, oh, Jade Cargill's upset with the role, then, you know, our whole take would be like, oh, she's upset because she wants to do more and we like that and we want. No, she's showing up, probably. I'm guessing. She's being professional. She's taking the massive opportunity that she has. And by not being a problem, we don't, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean that she doesn't want it any more or less. We just don't know. TG, I'm sorry, you had your hand up there.
All right, so here's my take on all this. I agree with you, Mark, in the sense of I don't think it's like a commitment or lack of thereof to the business or something like that. Here's what I think is going on with her. What is happening to her is honestly the same thing that is happening to a lot of people in AEW. It's just that it is more noticeable with Jade because of her sort of how striking she is, her potential, and the fact that she has been presented in a high-profile way. So I talked a little bit about this in the group chat, but like, think about. So here's what I think is happening, and then I'll talk about like kind of the other examples. Jade was brand new to the business. She was obviously identified as like, wow, this could be something special in wrestling. Brought into the company, trained, high-profile debut match. And then since then, she has, you know, she's been aligned with a couple of different mouthpieces. She has had times when she's been presented sort of like a Goldberg type character. Then
sure.
There was like you said, there's like the weird stuff with Bow Wow. And then like, what's that? That seems like a weird distraction. And like, why is that on TV? And I don't get it. she had the really nice, correct me if I'm wrong, but a really nice essay in The Athletic that she wrote. That was early on.
She's got a master's degree or something
Right.
like doctor or something. She's
So
a genius.
my point is that she is being pulled kind of in a bunch of different directions by this hodgepodge style booking that is, again, other than the EVPs and the people who are EVP adjacent, feuding with them or affiliated with them, like, you know, Adam Cole, Britt Baker, etc. This happens to a lot of people in AEW. It is really tough for them to get like a consistent thread, and it's especially tough when you have somebody who is new to the business and rightfully, I think, pushed as like a high profile person with a lot of potential. But you can say the same thing. So another example where this has happened and it's just been kind of lower on the under a little more under the radar is like somebody like Hook. Hook is brand new to the business.
Right.
Taz's son. He comes in. He doesn't talk, which is great strategy presentation wise. He's super over. He has like a couple of high profile matches, and then next thing you know, it's like, oh, he hasn't been on TV in a bit, and then he's back, and then it's like, oh, now he's kind of a background character in this inscrutable feud nonsense, like whatever. I mean, for her nonsense, like whatever that is. And so my point being that obviously that hasn't happened to Jade because she's the champion and she hasn't lost. But that same sort of like, where are you exactly on the card? What is the level of spotlight you're getting? It seems like the commitment shifts almost week to week in an unintentional, unthoughtful way where, say what you will about WWE, they sometimes invest a lot of time in people and then it just doesn't work out or the creative's not great or whatever. But rarely do you have a situation where somebody is, you know, pushed as a big deal or like given a bunch of TV time and maybe it's going relatively well. And then they just, other than injury, they just disappear.
It's equivalent to Austin Theory disappearing right now.
Great analogy.
It would never happen in WWE. And I'll go even further because you mentioned Hook, who at one point was the hottest thing and like the hottest rising thing in AEW. I will mention who we all love. Where the hell is Danhausen?
He's hurt. He hurt.
He never wrestled before.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, I mean, he came in months without wrestling, right? Yeah. He was injured when he came in. And he's like over a thing, and they just lose people.
And this is a we talked a little bit about this offline, but this is a particular problem that manifests itself around the TNT title. You have guys where it's like Powerhouse Hobbs. They build him up.
That's a great segue and point because that was our next session. Are we off of the women's division really quick? And because that was the
final thought.
That was the next thing I wanted to bring up.
Final thought on Jade. I will also say, half kidding, but half not kidding. Not sure she has ever regained her momentum after that disastrous AEW appearance, which if they were really looking out for her, they would have been like, let's just not run a show this week. I mean, it was like, holy crap. Like, this is terrible. Like, what are you doing? Do you not understand? Anyway.
There is a backstory interesting thing where I actually think WWE would be more mad at Trinity Fatu about this than AEW being mad at Jade Cargill. But they have been seen together multiple times in multiple locations. Miami Heat games, Wale Mania, where basically everybody was. But they have struck in what seems to be a legitimate, real friendship. They both live in Florida when they're, and it's like they are, who knows? Who knows if that kind of, I cannot see that souring AEW at all. There's a bunch of things that Trinity did over WrestleMania weekend that I think would have turned WWE executives off. But interesting.
Well, I'll just say, Jade, cut the shit. Learn to wrestle.
Yeah, see, you're blaming the victim.
I don't think it's Jade's fault.
Yeah, you're really. I'm not the only one. Me and you, TG, are on the exact same page.
Cool.
EJ, I think you're blaming the wrong person on this. You usually have appropriate ire and fire for TK and all those executive VPs.
If Mark Henry had found Jade Cargill instead of Bianca Belair, would Jade be?
Mark Henry did help find Jade Cargill.
Did he find both of them?
Yeah, I think. Well, I don't know about both, but yeah, Mark Henry's involved in the Cargill.
I want to go wherever he's hanging.
Bianca Belair
powerlifting tournament
was picked up at by Mark Henry and said, "Hey,
Jade was a Mark Henry person too."
Why is it work? Is it the difference in the structural organization of the companies that is why Bianca's thriving and Jade seemingly is stagnant?
One difference is you have a developmental program.
Yeah.
WWE.
There's a whole bunch of differences between WWE and AEW in regards to getting people to the next level. But the issue here, EJ, and we got to be very clear on this, it seems that you're directing your concern, even ire, to Jade Cargill directly. And my response to that seems to be, as what can she do? She is an employee. If they want to push her, I think she's
well, and not only that. I think
we're learning from All Access that
All Access is a
scripted
show.
That show is cooked.
Not scripted. No, not scripted. But I think I know it is. In Tony Khan's, but I think this is outside of just that. Laugh it up, guys. But in Tony Khan's business is run a lot different than Vince McMahon's business. Everyone has said you can bring ideas into that business. If you're not bringing anything to the table and you're just sitting around waiting, so you guys, I don't think you guys are appreciating how different that business actually is.
In response to that, I get what you're saying, but my thing is, and this is something like I think everybody can relate to, which is applicable to Jade's situation. I don't know what it's like to be a great athlete. I don't know what it's like to be beautiful, obviously. But I do know what it's like to be a new employee at a company or to have your first job in a new industry. And what I can tell you is most people, even very talented people, when they started a new job, especially if it's the first time in a new industry, they're going to be like, tell me what to do. Like, I'm new. Show me, like, I will do I trust you because you are of this industry and you tell me, like, what should I be doing? And I'll do it. And I really think that a lot of the stuff around Jade is even to the extent that some of these other examples we may talk about in a second would have the wherewithal to kind of push back or come up with ideas. Like somebody like Jade is going to be like, look, I mean, this is new. So if you're saying it's in my best interest to do X, especially when her debut was so high profile, she's going to trust them to kind of lead her, to a path towards success. And that I think is what is largely happening here.
The biggest mistake I'll say with Jade is she should be like the biggest, baddest heel. And AEW always does this thing where it's like after she wins a big match, she has her daughter. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Like they basically break character immediately after she wins like a big match.
Yeah.
I don't mind the Valkyrie stuff they're doing now, like the Smart Mark Sterling's back involved and they're suing her for the finishing move type stuff. My problem with Jade is it does take her too long to wrestle out, whether it's an Athena feud or a Chris Statlander feud. The only one that I thought was really well executed was Nyla Rose. And where is she? Nyla Rose is great. Where is Nyla Rose? But I'll see. We'll put a pin in this. We'll move on to what we were just talking about with the TNT title. I know EJ is going to be excited and worked up about this because it does feature one of his favorite people in AEW, Powerhouse Hobbs.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we were all very surprised, taken aback, whatever the hell is going on. They dropped the belt on Dynamite before leading up into a pay-per-view where they could have easily featured Hobbs and Wardlow. Wardlow wins the title back. He calls in Arn Anderson, QT Marshall. All of this is happening. But the bottom line is, as always, the TNT title is now switched hands again, and it is really just like the musical chairs of championship belts in AEW. Where do we stand, EJ, on Wardlow, Powerhouse Hobbs, now an Arn Anderson, QT Marshall, what we're doing here?
What have we had? We had Wardlow, Joe, Wardlow, Powerhouse, back to Wardlow. I think that's where we are now. I don't get it. I've said before, I don't mind some titles being moved around with some frequency, but not if they just do absolutely nothing and end up burying. What's Powerhouse Hobbs going to do now? Like, if this is because after this Pinnacle feud, MGF needs somebody else before he goes after Adam Cole. So Powerhouse Hobbs is going to, that doesn't really make sense. And that's not going to benefit Powerhouse Hobbs too much. If we're going to get more vignettes of the Book of Hobbs, cool, but you're no longer that menacing. I agree Wardlow should be a top guy holding top gold. But then what did his feud with Joe mean? Like, it's very disjointed and doesn't do, I mean, I guess it helps Wardlow sort of, but Wardlow didn't need nearly as much help as Powerhouse Hobbs could use. And, you know, I who knows when we're going to see Powerhouse Hobbs show up next? Who's more of a priority right now, Powerhouse Hobbs or Ricky Starks? Well, it probably should be Ricky Starks. That's taking nothing away from Powerhouse Hobbs, and he's just been knocked even further down to me. So it doesn't make sense. And I want to hear y'all's takes, but let me ask this quick question. QT Marshall and Alex Jones from InfoWars, have they ever been in the same room at the same time? I believe they're the same person.
I actually like the TMZ QT Marshall thing. Like it's the only thing that he's ever done in that company that I feel like worked at all. So.
I do like Powerhouse Hobbs a lot. I wish he had held that title and done something more with it. And I think this does zero for the title and for him. Wardlow's a good person to bring it back to prominence, though. So, like, you just got to kind of keep on rolling with it and see what happens next.
TG, where are you on this?
Biggest red flag for me was obviously everything you guys just said. I agree with. The changing hands of the title frequently is, I think, the reason it's a challenge for me is because of what Elliot said, which is there doesn't seem to be rhyme or reason to it. Like, you can have a title that changes hands frequently if it's part of like a story that makes sense why it's changing hands or the people involved or whatever. In this case, the biggest red flag for me is not only does Powerhouse Hobbs lose, but the second he loses, he disappears.
It's over. Luchasaurus. I was going to talk about this.
He comes out the second the match is over, and it's like, Powerhouse who? Like, gone. Like, just doesn't exist. So the problem here is that, I think it's a bad idea just specifically as to Powerhouse Hobbs. But this is happening frequently, especially with this title. If you go back and look at the list of guys who have held this title, not only has the title changed hands very frequently, but there's also been this pattern of like, okay, like, man, we have spent a long time, for example, building up Wardlow. Okay, great. And so he gets the championship, and then it's like, wait, he lost? But then he wins it back, but then he loses again. And then, so it's like, if you take the time to build up somebody like a Hobbs or like a Wardlow or a Miro, for example, it's fine. That's fine to do something with it. But if you do, these guys can't just like either drop the title almost immediately or, just disappear from view. And I felt like even going all the way back to Brody Lee dropping the title back to Cody, I was like, that happened way too fast. Like, why? Because you would build Cody up to be like, oh, he's taking on all comers and he's beating this guy. And then finally you had this guy who beat him. It would be like, well, I don't want to analogize to what's going on in WWE, but the point is that I think that they have, again, much like the Jade situation, these are similar in that I think they're the symptom of the thing that I see as the biggest challenge that AEW has from a on-screen product standpoint.
And here's the thing. The one that you mentioned a whole bunch of frustrating things around the TNT title. Nothing more frustrating to me than Scorpio Sky getting his own belt. They made his own belt and had him have like a LA Laker purple and gold belt. He had the title for 70 days, and he hasn't been seen since. And my thing is, if they do to Powerhouse Hobbs what they did to Scorpio Sky, I'm going to be livid. Because him and Ricky Starks were just getting over. Like, they were really getting over when they had the story that Hobbs turns on Starks. Fine. I didn't like it then, but fine. At least they feud with each other. It's the most frustrating thing. So then you get these Book of Hobbs kind of, storylines and taking you back to Oakland and all of this stuff. And I'm like, great, they're finally going to invest in Hobbs. QT Marshall comes in. They get the belt. I'm excited about this. At least let them drop it at a pay-per-view. Yeah. They had him drop it on Dynamite. And then, again, like Tom says, which was just the most ridiculous. When I heard Christian Cage's music, I was like, this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. So now Hobbs is in the ring. Wardlow doesn't even get to celebrate winning the title because literally he gets the pin, and then they hit Luchasaurus, Christian Cage's music. They don't even hit Wardlow's music. It was ridiculous.
So let me just give you real quick. I'm just going to give you the numbers on.
No, I'm looking. I saw it online. I saw it. All of the days. The longest one is Darby Allin, followed by Miro with like 140 or something?
Since Sammy Guevara won it in September of 21, so almost 2 years ago, there's only been one reign that even made it to 100 days, and that was Wardlow.
Best thing for Hobbs would be to link back up with Ricky Starks right now. That'd be the best opportunity for Powerhouse Hobbs.
Let's do some quick hitting stuff because we're already on the hour. We talked about 3 topics. You guys are awesome. I love this. But quick hitting. We did see the debut.
VHS tapes. Jade Cargill.
Right. We did see the in-ring debut of the Bullet Club and Switchblade Jay Wright. Really weird to me. Interesting match. They didn't give him a squash match. They gave him a lot of time. They made Commander, if it was like they made him do all of the sweet moves.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately Jay Wright hits him with the kill switch and it's over. But we've got this whole, Sean Spears is there. That was kind of weird. I didn't know what was happening. And then, we have the Ricky Starks run in as well. Quick hitters here. I like the formation of Bullet Club with Jay White and Juice Robinson. Those are 2 big members of Bullet Club. Bullet Club Gold is what they're calling it. I actually like it. I want like Sean Spears and them to join Bullet Club, which I think is going to be harder to do than we think. They can't just go out and recruit members and say that they're Bullet Club, even in this kind of iteration of AEW, because Bullet Club is a real thing. Like Bullet Club has like this real wrestling spirit to it where it's like, it's almost interchangeable parts. So it's like, I don't know if they can just be like tomorrow, Sean Spears is Bullet Club and everybody accepts it, So what do you guys think of Jay White, Juice Robinson, what they're going to do with the Bullet Club? I think Ricky Starks is the perfect use of his talents in time.
I think they're both good. I think Jay White being in AEW is going to be a plus for them. I agree with you. Weird debut match. It should have been Commander should have had a showcase match to show off all of his stuff against somebody else. Jay White should have had a squash-ish debut match.
Fuego del Sol, somebody,
Yeah, and like, get him over as like, oh, this dude is a potential main event guy here, not a guy who basically takes 90% of the offense during the match against Commander and then wins at the end. I don't know. Again, perplexing to an extent.
Jay White's going to be a big star if used right. He already is a huge star. I think this gives AEW another storyline to build off of because I think this is actually a stable that might actually have legs. It's been a while since they had the Pinnacle and JAS and Blackpool, I guess, are the only 2 sort of stables, and Blackpool is sort of reformed now. But a Bullet Club stable, I'm sure Tony Khan has longed for that for a while now in AEW. They've got it with Juice and Jay White. I do look for them to do some recruiting for people like Sean. It just gives another handful of guys to get some more time, even if they're in the background or coming out to save one of those 2. So yeah, I see the Bullet Club go and they're going to, and once you throw them into an Elite or Blackpool feud, then these stables are built up again. And I think a lot of that is good for the AEW product.
Speaking of stables, what about the super stable of FTR, Jay Lethal, Jeff Jarrett, Satnam Singh, Sanjay Dutt, and is it Mark Briscoe? What's happening here? I actually think Mark Briscoe is funny. I like it. I just think he's a funny person.
this is all sort of still like
They're going to completely turn on each other. We know that.
They will, but this is good because I think it gets it's a way to just kind of keep Mark Briscoe ingratiating the company. I think it's still, if there's anyone who's still got some misgivings about having a Briscoe in the company now, even with his brother passing and all the sympathy that was given toward him, it's good. I think this is probably still an ROH headed program, but who knows?
Can I say I'd rather have Mark Briscoe in AEW than Jeff Hardy, who will be speaking. Jeff Hardy speaks and addresses the audience this Friday on Rampage. I will tell you this. Every time I see Jeff Hardy, TG, I think I use this analogy quite a bit, but it's almost watching Alex Smith play quarterback. I don't think he's going to get hurt, but I also look at this like, God, he just should not be there. Like, he should be doing something else at this point in his life instead of like wrestling. What do you think about Jeff Hardy, TG, coming back?
I will say about, Jeff and everybody else associated with all this stuff that's swirling around the firm. It is, we step back and think about it. It's like, wow, they brought Jeff Hardy back before they would consider bringing CM Punk back. And that may happen down the road, but it's like, wow, that's interesting. Like the amount of backstage sort of bad will that CM Punk has is like greater than, the serious concerns about a guy who has substance abuse issues. I think so. I actually think more about Matt Hardy because the reason is because I loved the Broken Matt Hardy character so much, and yet now that he is mixed up in this mire of this firm stuff, I'm just like, I don't care about any of this. Like, the only guy who is at all related to this that I want to see on TV every week is Stokely Hathaway, who is superb.
Thank you.
Love him.
Superb.
So good on Twitter.
Oh,
he's like the best Twitter person to follow in all.
Unbelievable.
That's what we're not seeing Stokely Hathaway week after week. We should be.
Oh,
but we are getting Matt Hardy, Jeff Jarrett, and now Arn Anderson is back on our TV.
I actually think Jeff Jarrett has been pretty good.
But like there's too many other better options right now. I love Arn Anderson, always have. He's a sort of been there since the beginning, but like inserting him into I'd rather see Stokely Hathaway out there. The firm is nothing without Stokely. Ethan Page should be able to carry it on his own, even though he's never had the opportunity.
I think he's really good.
Ethan Page is so good.
Yeah,
Bill Moriarty. If the Hardys are gonna win, which they are, freeing them from the firm's gonna dissolve. You better find something for Stokely to do because he's awesome. And if we see Mark Sterling and Alex Jones, what's his name, QT Marshall, then we better be getting our heavy dose of Stokely too because he's better than all of them combined.
I will say this: I don't think they use Mark Sterling enough. I think Mark Sterling's hilarious.
I agree. I also think he's funny.
I think
Stokely is rapidly ascending my overall power rankings of entertaining people in pro wrestling.
Has he been on AEW?
God, no.
Well, that'll happen.
That'll
happen.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Man, I'm gonna.
When he came out in like the Nation of Domination to wrestle Hulk thing, I just thought it was the greatest thing I've ever seen. Like, who thinks of that stuff? It was hilarious.
When he did the thing on Twitter where he was like, it was like 3:45 a.m. and he's like standing in front of a strip club. He's like, I just got finished with physical therapy, and I'm really he's getting mad. But I think both the things we just talked about, the Jeff Jarrett, like all of that stuff, Mark Briscoe, and then also like everything that's going on with the firm and firm adjacent stuff, I think speaks to the fact that dead horse, but they really put a lot of thought in the things that are related to the EVPs and their feud and the world champ and his feud, and everything else is just like, let's just kind of throw stuff together. And that's what all these guys are just like, we need something for them to do. So it's almost like in the same way that like WWE creates the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal or the now Tag Team Showcase, like, let's make sure everybody's on the show and gets a payday as a one-off. That's kind of how AEW books week to week with everybody who's not in that group we just talked about. And it's eventually it creates problems. And I think it's doing that now.
But I guess the frustrating thing is they do have the talent to have two really good
question.
shows, because
No
you're only
question.
talking about 3 hours, and Friday could be House of Black, Jade Cargill. Like, they could do a whole bunch of really cool things on both nights. Guys, we're up against it, but I want to talk about what I will say right now, and I didn't think I would ever say this, given who's involved, but I want to talk about my favorite kind of feud, battle, whatever you want to call it, of all of AEW right now. And it does involve the executive VPs, because I think the Elite versus Blackpool is really exciting. I think it's really well done. I think they're telling a really, and this might be to your point, Tom, because they're of who it involves, but they know what they're doing. They've got, John Moxley, Claudio, Bryan Danielson, Wheeler, and they've got, the Jackson brothers, Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega, and now Takesha's involved. I love it. I thought it was great. I thought that whole thing was great.
I have two thoughts and two thoughts only. Number one, I agree with everything you just said. Number one, I love heel Bryan Danielson. Love. One of my favorites. Two, again, think one of the key things that makes this effective and good is that you have two opposing factions who make sense. They have a shared history, a story, like what they're all about, as opposed to these, hodgepodge things that we just talked about, where it's like, well, it's just random guys, let's put them together. So it's like, yeah, Blackpool Combat Club, we know what they're all about. The Elite, we know what they're all about, and there's history there, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, I think I don't worry about that story. That story is going to be solid, and the matches are going to be entertaining. But yeah,
EJ, are you surprised that it was Takesha and not Hangman Adam Page that came out?
Oh no, that's been sort of telegraphed for a few weeks with Don Callis' involvement with Takeshka. Thought there was maybe a chance Takeshka was gonna side with Blackpool. That's still could be TBD. He may turn on his newfound friends, because Kenny did look at him with a little bit of trepidation. Takeshka's a rising star. Yeah, these feuds are fine. What they put the most effort into obviously work, and you're dealing with all pros there who know what they're doing. Right. Yeah, I think what it could tell you is, if they don't come to terms and CM Punk doesn't come back to headline Wembley Stadium, this will probably still be okay. If you have Blackpool, you've got the highest people there, strongest, most recognized faces there: Omega, the Bucks, Danielson, Moxley. If you're not going to have Punk in the mix, these are the feuds you want to set up for a show like Wembley over the summer.
Here's a take. It's probably not a hot take. Even if Punk comes back, he doesn't headline Wembley. He may lead off Wembley, but he's not going to headline Wembley. But I think... Go ahead, Tom.
Maybe not. You might be right about that. But I think, especially if there's a guy who is like a UK guy who is in the... I mean, it could be, maybe Jay White or wait, no, is he from Australia?
He's from Australia. Or New Zealand, Australia.
Maybe New Zealand. But regardless, I do. So it could or could not be Punk. But here's the thing: we didn't even really talk about this. This can be for another show. But the word is that Punk's return is one of the things driving the possibility of a soft brand split for AEW, because they're going to have this new show Collision on Saturdays, and they're going to have Dynamite. I don't know what they're going to do about Rampage or whatever, but I think that would be a tremendous, tremendous asset for AEW to have a soft brand split, because to me it seems like there is sort of a natural divide in their roster, and I think the fact that they're trying to navigate this is causing some of the storyline problems. Specifically, I think you have guys. So think about this: like when I was watching the Pillars promo at the beginning, and those three dudes, I was like, I know that they, in-ring work is solid, but when I watch these guys as a WWE guy, I'm like, these are all indie guys. Like their average weight of the dudes in the ring right now is probably 175 pounds. I mean, because obviously Darby brings it down a little bit. but they have a very specific appeal to like people who followed them through their careers. And there's a lot of guys in AEW, sort of the old school AEW guys who are like that, including the EVPs. So you have one show with the EVPs and those sorts of guys who don't want to work with Punk or who have that kind of pedigree that really have that gritty indie appeal and like in-ring work, lots of flips, etc. And then you have this other group where it's like Punk, FTR, you know, some of the ex-WWE guys. Jericho's probably going to be the first guy who feuds with Punk when he comes back because he's willing to do it. And that to me gives you not only two distinct sort of flavors for your show. I think Jade Cargill would be a great fit for that show as well. But also you have, I think, a little more clarity around week-to-week booking. So you have fewer instances of, oh, here's a guy we're kind of pushing, or here's a group we're kind of pushing, and then like, wait, they're not on this week? Like that doesn't really make sense.
Right. You go from being the ninth guy on Dynamite to being the third guy on Collision.
But here's the thing. Why don't they do that with Rampage now? And it kind of seemed like when Rampage started, they were starting to do that.
Yeah,
so it's like they have the opportunity to do it in many ways.
I get what you're saying, and I agree at the beginning they were kind of thinking that way. I think the problem with Rampage is first it's an hour, which is a little tough, but also the time slot is so bad. Friday night at 10 o'clock is just that's where TV shows go to die.
Yeah, I mean, it's a horrible thing.
So I think that they realize sort of like, are we going to commit a ton of resources to this for a show that very few people are going to watch?
Right.
And I think that's also what's behind Collision, you know, being created.
Gentlemen, it is always great to spend some time. I really enjoy the fact that we were able to talk AEW for the majority of the show. It's been way, way too long. Final thoughts. Let's talk about the final thoughts before we get out of here. EJ, the Collector, do you have a final thought about it? All things wrestling as we close out this week's episode of WCWF.
Sure. I hope we get a chance to talk about it next Tuesday for our WWE show. I asked this question of Tom last time we met on Tuesday. Has WWE come out of WrestleMania with a bang or a whimper? I think they've just been limping along. I think the Bloodline storyline lost a lot of heat sort of after WrestleMania. The Brock Cody storyline and the Becky Trish storyline, like the two biggest storylines in wrestling. So WWE's, sort of had this 3 weeks where it hasn't really done a lot for me. The kind of show that AEW put on Wednesday, honestly, I've got some gripes about some of the stuff. We talk about every week, some of the problems, the ups and downs, but AEW right now is the kind of wrestling show that really speaks to me. So, and I'm definitely, enjoying it for 2 hours a week. And then, an hour on Friday, again, not quite exciting, but some of the ideas they're talking about, I think AEW is sort of like cresting that hill right now on a roller coaster with a summer full of Forbidden Door, this Wembley show, Jay White, getting some guys back like Adam Cole. I think we're going to see, and, Punk's always the linchpin right there. It could be a very exciting summer, like last summer was for all the wrong reasons for AEW. It could be an exciting summer. Ratings be damned. I don't care like how well a bump they get. That means nothing to me.
See, if you were still a TV executive, you wouldn't be saying that.
You are no longer a TV executive.
There are lots of TV executives on Twitter, apparently. I'm gonna enjoy it because it's the kind of show that really turns me on as a wrestling fan. So I'm here for it. That's my thought.
TG, final sub-elite thoughts about
as the resident WWE apologist. I agree with Elliot that WWE has been not bad, but definitely limping along a little bit post WrestleMania. But in their defense, I think that there are two specific reasons for that. Number one, of course, Roman Reigns taking a break, which is inevitably going to sap some of the energy from the Bloodline storyline, but also they had already decided that they were going to do a draft. And so I think right now they're in this holding pattern where it's like, we don't want to do anything too crazy with long-term storytelling if we're going to commit to a draft. The most interesting thing about the draft to me is that they have intentionally timed it so that it mirrors the NFL draft. because the NFL draft starts Thursday, and then Friday on SmackDown, that's their first of their draft, and the NFL draft, of course, continues Friday, Saturday, and then they finish.
Speaking of that, do you remember like how much this has changed? Like, I doubt this year they'll have fake like war rooms between Fox executives.
I kind of like that. It was cheesy, but I liked it.
And it was like, we draft this person to Raw, and like all the executives are like clapping and shaking hands and call. It's crazy.
That
was the first year on Fox, right?
Yeah, the Fox draft room, if you recall, had the Fox NFL robots.
It was insane.
It was
insane.
Which is that's exactly my kind of silly.
I like the old school way of you see cameras in the locker room, but they're all sitting there on chairs, and they get their reaction when they get announced.
Some of the and some of those years with some of those picks, like you've heard stories where people are like, that was a shoot, like the guy who got drafted like didn't know, like that was Vince being like, well, let's see how he reacts, because like Jim Ross, when he got drafted to SmackDown, he was like, they did not tell me before it was on TV that they were going to do that, and he didn't particularly appreciate that.
Right.
So I think WWE is gonna, I think they will bounce back. I do think, and again, this is a whole can of worms we're not going to talk about now. I do think that at least, other than that one post WrestleMania Raw, I do believe that Triple H really is largely in control still. Even though Vince is back on the corporate side. I don't think Vince is like meddling with a lot of stuff. At least it doesn't seem like it. But yeah, they do need to get momentum back. I think they will post draft, but if they don't, then that's going to be a problem. I do like that they're on Raw. They conveniently have, like, both in the Becky Trish story and in the Brock Cody story, they very conveniently have the heels literally wear black cowboy hats, which is super helpful for viewers like me who heard fast forwarding a bit.
Keith, what's your final thought?
A lot of the time when I talk about wrestling, I talk about the actual storylines and what's happening, what's not happening, and who wants to be used more, and that type of stuff is kind of fun and exciting for me. It's been pointed out often that about particular in-ring work, especially in AEW, that I think I just ignore because I really like the awesome long match, and I like the random kickouts. But I think there was like several matches last night where it was like foreign object, finishing move, like, and then the person still kicks out. And I just thought it was really like, at some point, like the no selling of like finishing moves are going to be nothing. And I just laughed because I never really put a lot of that together until I was kind of thinking back and watching this match and being like, I can't remember what match it was, but it was like cheating, foreign object, this is it, finishing move, oh my God, this is definitely it. And then like, no, the person kicks out. And the crowd's like, this is awesome. And we're like, what? Like, how does this happen? So that was interesting. I'm going to be paying closer attention to like what's called the no sells, because I know they happen in all wrestling, but I think AEW has now taken this up to a new level of like, just to make these matches like the Fight Forever matches. The other thing I really want to give a shout out to is, I don't know if we talked about this on any show, but travel issues seem to make, we talked about it, I think the last time we had the WWE show, but travel issues seem to make some of the weirdest and in some ways some of the greatest shows. It wasn't that great of a Raw the other day when they had like, was it Raw or SmackDown, when they had just a ton of travel issues?
Yeah, Raw.
And Dominic Mysterio's like choking all over the place and we didn't know what was happening. But travel issues, especially coming back from Saudi Arabia, led to probably one of the greatest like SmackDowns, I think it was, of all time, when they had like all of the NXT guys wrestle like all of the WWE guys that were there. And it wound up being like a main event of Adam Cole versus Bryan Danielson. It was awesome.
Right. That's
it was
right.
like an awesome thing. So I just really thought that those two were some neat things on the way out. I'm enjoying wrestling now. I don't know why. I agree with you that WWE hasn't been great, but it hasn't been great compared to WWE of a few weeks ago. It's still a really good. I think if I put it apples to apples beside what is happening with AEW, there's a lot that I would say is very much on par and comparable. But WWE was riding a high leading into WrestleMania with the Sammy and the Bloodline, and EJ's favorite Bray Wyatt doing really great things all the time, and so I just think that couldn't be maintained. That level of like awesomeness of us every week saying this might be the best WWE we've ever gotten. There's always peaks and valleys. I think we're in kind of a WWE leading into the draft valley.
Yeah.
But fun time, guys. I love spending time with you guys. I love talking wrestling. I think that's it. I think we got to count this. I think we got to count this thing out. Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. Catch you next time on